Sunday dinners in Cleveland had a rhythm that rarely changed. Evander liked the comfort of routine, and Celine liked the performance of tradition. I brought the casserole as always, though I had little appetite left for these gatherings. At 70, my hands moved more slowly, but my mind was as sharp as the shelves I once kept in perfect order at the library. We sat down at the oak table, Evander at the head, Celine already scrolling her phone, me at the side where my late husband used to sit. The salad passed in silence. The breadbasket came and went. And then, just as I thought we would spend another evening pretending civility, Evander cleared his throat. "Mom," he said, casual as if asking me to pass the salt. "Celine will live in your apartment. It makes sense. The place is too much for you, and she'll make better use of it." The words landed like a stone in still water, but no one seemed to notice the ripple. Celine lifted her head only long enough to flash that polite, triumphant smile I had come to know so well. My fork paused above my plate, and for a moment I simply studied my son, the man I had carried, fed, clothed, and defended. He said it like a decision, not a discussion. I set the fork down gently, folded my napkin, and gave him a smile that betrayed nothing. "If it helps her," I murmured, steady as a librarian whispering order into a noisy room. He nodded, satisfied, already moving on to weather talk. Celine leaned back with a smirk, and the air around them grew lighter, as if a burden had been lifted from their shoulders and placed onto mine. But inside, I was steady in a different way. The deed had never left my hands. They assumed rights that were never theirs. I let them believe my silence meant surrender, sipping the tea that had long since gone cold, already shaping the plan that would carry me through the days ahead. When Harold died of a heart attack at 38, the world shrank around me. One morning I was a wife planning our summer trip to Lake Erie, and by evening I was a widow with a 4-year-old boy clinging to my skirt, asking when his father would be home. There was no space for grief. Bills came faster than condolences, and survival became my only rhythm. I worked nights at the library, shelving books until my back ached, then walked across town to pour coffee at the diner until dawn. My palms smelled of ink and grease, and my knees never stopped aching. Every dollar I tucked away had Evander's name written on it. New shoes for him meant no new coat for me. His sports camps meant I gave up choir rehearsals. Vacations disappeared, friendships thinned. I measured success in his full stomach, his sharpened pencils, his unbroken sleep. The downtown condo came from Harold's insurance. I bought it not for grandeur, but for shelter. A place where Evander would always have a roof, and where I could breathe without asking permission. I polished every corner, even when my hands were raw, because it was ours, or so I thought. As the years stretched, the gratitude I expected never arrived. Evander grew tall, confident, and entitled. A car appeared in his driveway because I co-signed the loan. Tuition checks cleared because I skipped my own doctor visits. Rent was covered when his job slipped through his fingers. Each time, I waited for the words, "Thank you." And each time, they never came. I told myself it was love, that love asked nothing back, but in the quiet nights, staring at the same 4 walls Harold never saw, I wondered if love had become another word for erosion. And as Evander aged into a man who believed taking was his birthright, I began to see how every sacrifice had built not just his life, but his expectations. That truth echoed in me still, carrying me straight into the moment when Celine's smile would sharpen everything I already knew. Celine has a way of dressing her barbs in satin. That evening, as she stacked dishes in my sink with exaggerated care, she leaned close enough for her perfume to sting. "Don't worry, Corinna," she said, her voice a sugary thread. "I'll make your old condo shine. It's wasted on you anyway." Her smile lingered, all white teeth and painted lips, but I knew the weight beneath it. Compliments from Celine were daggers wrapped in ribbons. I offered only a small nod, drying my hands on a towel, and let the silence carry my answer. Later, as I gathered my coat from the hall, I heard their voices drifting from the kitchen. I should have stepped outside, but my feet froze when I caught Celine's whisper. "Once it's in our name," she breathed, "we can flip it. That'll fund my boutique." Finally, seed money for something real. Evander's laugh followed, soft but certain. "Mom won't fight it. She never does." The words scraped deeper than I expected. They weren't talking about a home. They were dividing spoils of a conquest, planning profits from walls Harold and I once painted with our own hands. For them, my sacrifice was merely inventory. I slipped quietly into my bedroom and shut the door with deliberate gentleness. On the nightstand sat a photograph of Harold in his favorite flannel, his arm around a much younger me. I touched the frame, tracing the lines of his face as if he could steady me still. "They think I'm weak." "Harold," I whispered. "Let them." My hand lingered there, not with despair, but with a calm I hadn't felt in years. They thought silence was surrender. They mistook patience for frailty. They believed age meant the end of power. I knew better, and as I lay down that night, the echo of their whispers pressed against me like a storm against glass. But I did not break. I simply waited, knowing their footsteps would soon lead them toward a door that no longer belonged to them. The condo was never just brick and mortar to me. I still remember the day I signed the papers, Harold barely gone, the insurance check trembling in my hand. The realtor spoke of square footage and neighborhood value, but all I saw was survival. I saw a safe place for Evander to grow, walls that no landlord could threaten, windows where light might return after so much darkness. Every corner held Harold's ghost. The bay window where he used to sit with the morning paper became my reading nook. The narrow balcony, though modest, was where we had once sipped Sunday coffee, pretending the city was ours alone. Even the scuffed kitchen counters bore the memory of our first small dinners, laughter loud enough to carry past the cabinets. For decades, I told myself this was Evander's inheritance. Someday, I thought, he would stand taller. Knowing his parents had secured him a piece of permanence, I imagined him raising children there, perhaps even teaching them to respect what we had built. But the years washed that hope thinner, until it dissolved into nothing but wishful thinking. Every demand he made, tuition checks, rent money, bailouts, proved the truth. I did not want to admit he saw me not as a mother with sacrifices behind her, but as a resource without limits. Celine only sharpened that view, turning my condo into her stepping stone, her seed money. So last spring, with no announcement and no farewell tour of the rooms, I listed it quietly, papers signed, keys turned over. The condo was gone before Evander or Celine thought to ask. The funds now rest secure in my account, a nest they will never touch. They plot over property that no longer belongs to me or to them, and when the day comes, they will arrive at a door that opens to a stranger, chasing shadows while I sip my tea in peace. The week after that dinner became a parade of messages, each one written with the certainty of people who had already claimed their prize. "We'll move Celine's mattress." Friday, Robert's got the boxes ready. She's so excited to finally have her own space. I read them with the same detachment I once used for overdue notices at the library, each assumption stamped with confidence, each line proof of how little they believed my voice mattered. I gave no reply. Silence is its own answer, sharper than any argument. Celine's posts spread quickly across the family's gossip lines. A photo of her standing with folded arms, captioned "New Chapter." Moving into our place soon. Relatives commented with strings of hearts and clapping emojis. No one asked me if it was true. They didn't need to, in their minds. My compliance was a given. Each evening, instead of answering, I slipped away to the farmer's market near my rental in Shaker Heights. Among the stalls of peaches, jars of honey, and chatter of vendors, I found a rhythm that belonged to me alone. No one there cared who owned what condo. They only cared if you wanted sweet corn or sourdough. I walked slowly, breathing in the scent of basil and rain-soaked wood. My silence to Evander and Selene turning into a kind of nourishment. One afternoon, a letter waited in my mailbox from my attorney. Inside, a single sheet confirmed what I already knew, but cherished seeing in print the funds from the condo had been secured into a certificate of deposit. My financial independence set beyond reach. I traced the embossed letterhead with my finger, steadying myself on the thought that no matter how loudly Selene boasted, her hands would never touch a cent. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my desk drawer, where Harold's photograph rested. Their assumptions gathered like storm clouds, but my foundation had never been firmer. And as the week drew to its promised Friday, I knew exactly where I would be when the knock finally came. Saturday dawned mild, the kind of morning that seemed to beg for escape. I slipped out of the house before the sun fully cleared the trees, walked to the corner cafe, and ordered my usual coffee. The warmth of the cup steadied me as I made my way to the market, rows of tents unfolding like bright sails against the gray sky. My phone buzzed once in my pocket, then again, and again, each vibration sharper than the last. I ignored the first three, letting the rhythm play out. On the fourth, I answered. Celine's voice tore through the line, high-pitched and frantic. Some man is here. He says he owns the condo. He's refusing to let us in. Behind her, I heard the scuffle of bags hitting pavement. Evander's voice rising in disbelief. I let a pause stretch, long enough for them to hear the steadiness in my breathing. Then I answered, even, calm. He does own it. I sold it weeks ago. The silence on their end was jagged. Selene shrieked something I couldn't catch. Evander cursed under his breath, and the background clatter told me boxes had been dropped like weapons in retreat. I pressed the phone closer for a moment, absorbing the storm, and then ended the call without a farewell. The market was just beginning to hum with life. I stopped at a stall selling cherry tarts, their crusts golden, their filling thick and red. I chose one, ate slowly, and let the sweetness linger. Around me, laughter, bartering, and the sound of children's shoes against the pavement wove into a chorus that felt like freedom. For the first time in months, I inhaled fully, without the weight of expectation pressing against my ribs. They could rage, they could flail, but their fight was with shadows. By the time I tossed the paper bag into the bin, I already knew the day wasn't finished with me. By evening, the quiet of Shaker Heights was broken by the sound of a car pulling up outside my rental. Through the lace curtain, I saw the trunk yawning open, stuffed with boxes and suitcases. Evander's frame bent under the weight of one, Selene directing him like a foreman, her heels clicking against the walk. The knock came 3 sharp raps, impatient, almost indignant. I opened the door only halfway. Evander's face was flushed, his voice clipped. You owe us. You said she could move in. I kept my gaze level. I never said here. I said if it helps her. That was before I sold it. Selene stepped forward. Eyes narrowed, voice trembling with rage. You're cruel. Corinna, after everything we've planned, you humiliate us like this. Her words rolled over me like water, over stone. I did not raise my tone, nor did I move to argue. Instead, I reached for the phone resting on the console table by the door. My hands did not shake as I dialed. 911. What's your emergency? Yes, I answered clearly, with the calm of a woman who had rehearsed this moment in silence for years. I have family members outside my residence who are refusing to leave. They are not on the lease and were not invited. Evander's voice cracked. Mom, you can't be serious. This is family. But seriousness had become my language. I gave the dispatcher my address. My voice steady, unwavering. The patrol car arrived within minutes, its quiet authority cutting through their shouting. The officer stepped out, listened to my explanation, then turned to Evander and Celine. You need to leave. Now. Celine sputtered protests. Evander cursed under his breath, but the officer's stance was immovable. Slowly, angrily, they packed their boxes back into the trunk, the slam of metal echoing down the street. For the first time in 40 years, I had not yielded, not bent, not absorbed the blow in silence. I watched their taillights vanish into the dark, the night air cool on my face. The sound of authority lingering longer than their footsteps, but I knew the battle was only shifting, not finished. By morning, the storm had gone digital. A cousin called first, her voice laced with concern, but I didn't need her words. I had already seen the post. Evander had written it late in the night. Each line crafted to wound me. My mother abandoned us, left us standing in the street with nowhere to go. After all we've done for her. Beneath his words sat a photograph of Celine, face streaked with mascara tears. Her hand pressed dramatically to her forehead. The comments poured in, swift and certain. How could she? A mother should always sacrifice. So cold, so selfish. Names I hadn't seen in decades joined the chorus, judging me from the comfort of their screens. I sat at my desk, opened a folder I'd been keeping for years, and began my response. Not with anger, not with pleas, but with proof. A screenshot of the transfer I'd made to cover their mortgage when Evander lost his job. A copy of the tuition receipt from his second year at Ohio State. My name written in bold on the line marked payer. The invoice from the credit card company I'd bailed out in Celine's name. I arranged them like chapters of a book they had chosen to forget. Finally, I added one line: I didn't abandon my family. I just stopped being their ATM. I hit post and set the phone aside. The kettle whistled in the kitchen, and I poured myself a cup of tea. By the time I returned, the notifications had multiplied. Dozens of shares, comments shifting tone shock, reconsideration, even admiration. A few friends from the library years chimed in with quiet support. By evening, Evander's side of the feed had fallen silent. The picture of Celine was still there, but the comments had slowed to a trickle. My receipts had spoken louder than their cries, and for the first time in years, the weight of explanation lifted from my shoulders. The house felt calmer, but I knew the quiet would not last. The following week settled into a rhythm I had almost forgotten was possible. Morning light touched the garden outside my window, where I coaxed roses and marigolds into bloom. Harold had loved them both, roses for their stubborn beauty, marigolds for their cheerful defiance. Kneeling in the soil, I felt his presence more in the dirt under my fingernails than in any old photograph. Inside, the house carried a gentleness I hadn't known in years. No slammed doors, no phones buzzing with urgent demands, just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the slow drip of the kettle. I brewed chamomile tea each evening, letting the steam curl around my face like a benediction. 1 cup, 2 hands. Silence. That was all I needed. I began to wander into town more, unhurried. At the library branch near Shaker Square, I found a flyer for a local book club. The following Thursday, I joined them 7 women around my age, passing dog-eared novels and plates of cookies. When I told a small part of my story, careful not to spill everything, they nodded in recognition. One woman squeezed my hand and whispered, "We've all been there, in our own ways." Their quiet solidarity warmed me more than any apology from Evander ever could. Evenings grew softer. I read by lamplight, watered my plants, and listened to the tick of the old clock in the hallway. The absence of chaos was not emptiness. It was wealth. I thought of all the years I had paid debts that were never mine. Debts measured not in money, but in endless patience, in silence that swallowed my own needs. Now that silence was different. It wasn't burden. It was profit. And as I closed my book one night, I knew the peace I had carved out was not a gift from anyone else. It was my own creation. Still, I understood peace was fragile, and some doors would try to open again whether I invited them or not. The money from the condo sat in my account for months, steady and untouched, like a secret I carried in my pocket. I could have used it to travel, to buy a newer car, or to pad my own comfort. But the thought gnawed at me that Harold's insurance, meant to protect, had become a point of greed in Evander's hands. I refused to let his memory end in bitterness. So I walked into a modest law office downtown and began the paperwork for something new, the Hale Foundation. A small fund, nothing flashy, designed to provide microgrants for widows starting over and single mothers fighting to stand on their own. It wasn't charity, it was dignity passed forward. Each grant was a door, cracked open where life had once slammed them shut. Word spread quietly through the community, as good news sometimes does. At church potlucks, in the grocery line, whispers of the foundation's first recipients reached ears that weren't mine, and eventually, it circled back to Evander. I heard from a neighbor that he looked stunned when someone congratulated him on his mother's foundation. He hadn't expected that the fortune he once tried to seize would instead scatter into the hands of strangers' women he would never know. Women who mirrored the girl I had once been, standing alone with a child and no map forward. One evening, I sat with the final draft of the foundation's charter before me. I read it through, signed my name, and whispered into the quiet. I was never your burden, Evander. You were mine, and I finally set it down. The pen slipped from my hand, the document complete, and I felt the door of my life click shut on all that had come before, leaving only the choice of which keys I would pass on.